In December 1997, one of the most iconic cuts in the world became illegal to sell in an entire country, not because of fraud, not because of price, because of what was inside the bone. And that is only one of 12 steak cuts with a story you would not expect. 12 cuts, one complete breakdown. Ribeye. The most popular steak in the world has no bone, no ceremony, and no apology. Ribeye comes from the rib section, ribs 6 through 12, where the muscle does almost no work. That inactivity is the point. Fat infiltrates the tissue in thin white threads, creating the marbling that defines the cut. The more the animal rests, the richer the meat becomes. The name is literal. A ribeye is the eye of the rib, the central muscle, longissimus dorsi, surrounded by fat. Butchers in 19th century America started isolating it specifically because the center cooked more evenly than the full rib. It needs nothing. No marinade, no sauce. High heat, a cast iron pan, and the fat does the rest. The crust forms in 90 seconds. The interior stays soft. Every other cut on this list is trying to be something. Ribeye already is.
Filet mignon. The most expensive cut per pound comes from the muscle that does the least work in the animal's body. Filet mignon is cut from the tenderloin, a long marrow muscle that runs along the spine and never bears weight. Because it never contracts, the fibers stay short and fine. The result is texture so soft it requires almost no chewing. French butchers named it in the 19th century, filet, thread, mignon, delicate. The name is accurate. A whole tenderloin weighs only about 5 to 6 pounds on a full-grown steer. From that, you get perhaps 8 portions. The scarcity is structural, not artificial. The weakness is flavor. Fat carries taste, and filet has almost none. Restaurants wrap it in bacon or finish it in butter to compensate. The cut is famous for what it lacks as much as for what it has. Tenderness without flavor is still a luxury. The market decided that long ago. New York strip. This cut has been called 4 different things in 4 different countries, and none of them agree. New York strip in the United States, sirloin in Australia, strip loin in Canada, club steak in parts of Europe. The same muscle, longissimus dorsi, the same one that produces ribeye, cut from further back, past the ribs into the short loin. New York butchers began marketing it aggressively in the 1940s. Delmonico's restaurant in Manhattan had been serving a version of it since the 1830s, but the name only solidified when steakhouse culture exploded after the Second World War. The fat here is different from ribeye. Less internal marbling, more edge fat, a thick white strip along one side that renders down during cooking and bastes the meat from outside rather than within. The texture is firmer, the flavor is cleaner. It is the cut that built the American steakhouse. T-bone. 2 steaks in one cut. One animal, one knife line that separates them. The T-bone is defined by its bone, a cross-section of the lumbar vertebra that divides the short loin into 2 distinct muscles. On one side, the strip, firm and flavorful. On the other, a smaller portion of tenderloin, soft and mild. The bone is not decorative. It conducts heat differently than muscle, slowing the cook near the center and creating a gradient of doneness in a single piece of meat. Italian butchers working in Chicago in the early 20th century are credited with popularizing the T-bone as a distinct product. Before that, the short loin was often sold whole or broken down differently depending on the region. The ratio matters. If the tenderloin portion exceeds 1 1/4 inches in diameter, the cut is reclassified as a porterhouse. Below that threshold, it is a T-bone. The line is precise. The USDA enforces it. 1 bone, 2 textures. A cut that refuses to choose. Tomahawk. This is not a different cut. It is a statement. Tomahawk is a ribeye.
The same muscle, the same fat, the same section of the animal, with the full rib bone left intact. The bone extends anywhere from 16 to 20 inches beyond the meat, trimmed clean by hand. It serves no culinary function. It cannot be eaten. It exists entirely for visual impact. The name came from American steakhouse marketing in the early 2000s. Butchers had always known the bone could be left long, but there was no commercial demand until premium steakhouse culture created one. The tomahawk became a social media object before social media had fully formed. Oversized, dramatic, impossible to ignore on a plate. The bone does affect the cook marginally. Longer bones act as handles that keep the meat off direct heat at the edges, creating a slightly more even temperature gradient. Chefs call it self-basting. Scientists call it marginal. The real function is theater, and theater, in a restaurant, has always had a price. Sirloin. The name contains a myth so persistent that food historians spend time specifically debunking it. The story goes that an English king, Henry VIII in some versions, James I in others, was so impressed by a loin of beef that he knighted it, Sirloin. The story is charming. It is also almost certainly false. The word sirloin comes from the Old French surlinge, sur meaning above, linge meaning loin, above the loin, no knighting required. Sirloin sits behind the short loin toward the rear of the animal. The muscle works harder here than in the rib section, which means less marbling and more chew. In exchange, the flavor is deeper. Grass-fed sirloin in particular develops a mineral, almost herbaceous taste that grain-fed cuts rarely achieve. In the United States, top sirloin and bottom sirloin are sold separately. In the United Kingdom, sirloin refers specifically to what Americans call top sirloin, the more tender portion. A cut defined by a false story, the meat is better than the legend. Hanger. For most of the 20th century, butchers kept this cut for themselves. Hanger steak hangs from the diaphragm, a single muscle that connects the last rib to the spine and supports the internal organs. There is exactly one per animal. It was called the butcher's steak in France, anglais, because it rarely reached the retail counter. The people breaking down the carcass took it home. The muscle works constantly. Breathing never stops. That continuous movement builds dense, coarse fibers, an intense, almost livery flavor that polarizes opinions immediately. There is no neutral response to hanger steak. American consumers largely ignored it until the early 2000s, when restaurant chefs began featuring it as an affordable alternative to strip and ribeye. The price rose within a decade. The secret got out. Hanger must be cooked fast, hot, and to no more than medium. Past that point, the fibers tighten and the cut turns from exceptional to inedible in minutes. One per animal. The butcher knew what he was keeping. Skirt. This cut predates the steakhouse by several centuries. Skirt steak is the diaphragm muscle, long, flat, heavily grained with a fat cap that runs along its length. There are two types, outside skirt from the plate section and inside skirt from the flank. Outside skirt is thicker, more marbled, more expensive. Inside skirt is thinner and more commonly found in retail. Mexican vaqueros working cattle drives in Texas in the 19th century cooked skirt over open fire because it was the cut they had access to, the less desirable portions left after better cuts were taken. They marinated it in citrus and spice to break down the tough fibers. That preparation became fajitas. The grain on skirt runs across the short dimension of the cut. Slicing with the grain produces long, chewy strands. Slicing against it, perpendicular to the fibers, shortens them into tender, manageable pieces. Most people cut it wrong. The fajita was working-class food. Now it appears on menus at $40 a plate. Flank.
Same region, different muscle, different logic entirely. Flank steak comes from the abdominal wall, below the loin toward the rear, a flat, wide muscle with visible parallel grain running the length of the cut. It looks similar to skirt, it behaves differently. Where skirt releases fat as it cooks, flank stays lean. Where skirt is built for fast, high heat, flank accepts long marinades. The acid in a soy and citrus marinade begins breaking down the protein chains before heat ever touches the meat. Korean galbi, London broil, Vietnamese bo luk lak, all of them center on flank or flank-adjacent cuts prepared with extended marination. The French call it bavette. In Argentina, it is matambre, literally hunger killer, often stuffed with vegetables and hard-boiled eggs, rolled tight and slow-cooked. Same animal, same region as skirt. One went to Texas, one went to Seoul.
Picanha. In Brazil, this is not a premium cut. It is the default. Picanha sits at the top of the rump, a crescent-shaped muscle covered by a thick, uniform fat cap. Brazilian churrasqueiros fold it into a C shape, skewer it through the fat, and cook it over charcoal with nothing but coarse salt. The fat renders down through the meat as it rotates. No marinade, no sauce, no intervention. Outside Brazil, the cut was largely unknown until the 1990s, when Brazilian steakhouse chains, churrascarias, began expanding internationally. In the United States, most of the picanha ended up ground into hamburger because American butchers broke the rump down differently and did not isolate it as a distinct product. The fat cap is not optional. Trimming it is considered a mistake. It is the mechanism of the entire preparation. Brazil has been eating this cut for generations. The rest of the world is catching up.
Chuck. Most of this cut never becomes a steak. Chuck covers the shoulder and neck, the hardest working section of the animal. The muscles here support the head, power the front legs, and bear constant load. That work builds collagen, connective tissue, and dense, interlocking fibers that make the meat tough if cooked fast, and extraordinary if cooked low and slow. Chuck accounts for roughly 28% of the entire carcass. A significant portion goes directly to grinding. Chuck is the primary source of ground beef in the United States. The fat content, typically around 20%, is considered ideal for burgers. When the fast food industry scaled in the 1950s and 60s, chuck became the industrial backbone of American beef culture. The flat iron steak, cut from the top blade of the chuck, emerged in 2002 from university research specifically aimed at finding steakhouse-quality muscle hidden inside the shoulder. It is now one of the most ordered cuts in American restaurants. The shoulder fed a civilization. Nobody called it glamorous.
Wagyu ribeye. This is the same cut, it just isn't the same meat. Wagyu refers to 4 specific Japanese cattle breeds. The word means Japanese cow, selectively bred over centuries for one characteristic above all others: intramuscular fat. Not edge fat, not marbling in the conventional sense. Fat distributed so densely through the muscle fiber that the meat appears white rather than red. The Japanese grading system runs from 1 to 5 for yield and 1 to 5 for quality. A5 is the highest achievable grade: maximum marbling, maximum color, maximum texture score. A single A5 Wagyu ribeye from a certified farm in Miyazaki or Kobe can cost more than $300 per pound at retail. The fat in Wagyu melts at a lower temperature than standard beef fat, closer to human body temperature. A slice placed on the tongue begins to dissolve before chewing starts. Chefs serve it in portions of 2 to 3 ounces, precisely because a full steak becomes overwhelming. The breeding records for some Wagyu bloodlines extend back over 200 years. Each animal's parentage is documented, certified, and traceable to a specific farm and prefecture. This is not a steak. It is a controlled biological outcome.
Unique fact. In December of 1997, The British government made it illegal to sell beef on the bone. Not all beef, specifically beef attached to the vertebral column, T-bone steaks, porterhouse, cuts where the spinal bone remained intact. The reason was bovine spongiform encephalopathy, BSE, mad cow disease, a neurological condition caused by misfolded proteins called prions that had moved through British cattle herds through contaminated feed. By 1996, variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, the human form, had been confirmed in British patients. The government's scientific advisors identified the dorsal root ganglia, nerve tissue clustered along the vertebral column, as a potential transmission route. The regulation came into effect on the 16th of December 1997. Butchers were required to remove all bone attached to the spine before sale. T-bone steak, one of the most recognizable cuts in the world, was effectively banned in the United Kingdom. The ban lasted until December of 1999, 2 years during which a steakhouse staple was treated as a controlled substance. Restaurants that violated the regulation faced criminal prosecution. The prion risk through dorsal root ganglia was later assessed as extremely low. The science moved faster than the policy. A cut that defined British steakhouse menus for a century, illegal for 2 years because of what lived inside the bone.